Hey guys, it's me, Mr. 250, and welcome back to Banshee's Last Cry. So, I hope you guys are ready to figure out who the murderer is, because that's what we're doing today. So, the one problem with this game, I'd have to say, is that it doesn't really ease you into it. You don't, get to see a few clues. I mean, the only clues you guys have really seen so far are some, mildly helpful, but ultimately very difficult to discern who the killer is clues. And the only real way to figure out what it is to basically get told who the killer is. Isn't going to help us for this route, but it will help us for others, obviously. So, where we're at right now is, this is right after Abby's been killed, and we're deciding, hey, maybe we should check out the room that Mr. Jones is in. That's probably why Abby was killed. And we originally said, you know, Bobby can come with us. We were a little bit suspicious of him, but we decided to have Bobby come with us. Now, let's do rational explanation time for why I would want to go with someone else. Well, keep in mind, Bobby at the time was very suspicious. We were thinking maybe, you know, he's the only one capable of committing the first murder, and maybe Bobby is faking being sad for the second murder, and I think we're still suspicious of him hitting Faberge on the head. So we're going to be like, okay, well, what if we pick someone else? Bobby snorted derisively. You don't trust me, huh? Fine. Mr. Faberge, would you mind going with them? I'm sure they wouldn't object to you. But he's hurt, Grace protested. Faberge waved her off. It's fine, he said, a smile on his face. I can handle a little trip to the guest rooms. Just don't do anything that would interfere with the police investigation. Same thing as before. So we get there. What are you looking for anyway, Faberge asked. I had no answer, of course. Ignoring him, I opened the door. And this is very similar. Grace can't stand it in here, and it's very cold. I walked straight in and started opening the bathroom door. Just as I was about to peek inside, I heard a sound behind me like someone falling. I turned around and saw that Grace and Faberge hadn't followed me in. Grace? What's wrong? No answer. I had a bad feeling about this. What if Faberge was the killer? Maybe he saw an opening and killed Grace just now. No, it couldn't be. Even if he was the killer, there was no need to add to her to his list of the victims. Faberge? As soon as I stuck my head out of the door to look into the hallway, something heavy smashed into my skull, and my legs instantly turned to rubber. Flashes of light, like a strobe light, swirled in front of my eyes, and I was momentarily dazed. Grace. I was laid out on the floor, the hallway spinning madly in my vision. I tried to get up, but I couldn't get my limbs to work. Warm sweat dripped down my forehead, making little pattering noises as it hit the ground in front of me. Then I saw it wasn't sweat. It was my own blood. The back of my head throbbed with pain. I heard a groaning that sounded like it was coming from someone else, but somehow I knew it had to be me. Two legs stood in front of me. With all my strength, I struggled to lift my head. But since the light was shining in my face and my vision was still screwed up, all I could see was an unidentifiable dark silhouette. I tried to focus my eyes. I caught a glimpse of the shadowy figure overhead slowly raising something over their head. It was going to kill me. No, I didn't want to die. I wanted to plead for my life, but couldn't force out the words. The shadowy figure swung down hard, and I heard a whistling sound as it descended. A shadow in the hall. Now, you know, I don't want to, you know, go right out and say it, but it does seem fairly obvious who the killer is now, doesn't it? Mr. Faberge, yes. Now, you might be saying, well, Mr. 250, you know, yeah, well, I mean, he was dead. He was dead. You know, how could he have killed everybody? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at next. So, now that you guys know who the killer is, which, you know, I know it's a little unceremonious, I know, but you have to know who the killer is to get these other routes, is the thing. It's all of these routes where we say, well, the killer is, and then it gives us a keyboard, and we have to know it's Faberge to do it. which is a little unfortunate. I kind of wish they eased it in a bit more, but that withstanding, these next couple routes will be quite interesting, because some of your questions you'll be like, well, how did who is the killer? How did that happen? What happened here? A lot of your questions will be answered. Now, some of them are a little still mysterious, but most of them you can work out. A shadow in the hall. So next, we're going to start answering the questions, well, Faberge was dead. How did he continue killing people? Let's find out. Alright, back here again, same place as before, where we suspected both Grace and Amber here, Mr. Buchanan's wife. Now, of course, now that we know that it's Mr. Faberge, we're going to suspect Mr. Faberge. Now, we can enter either Mr. Faberge, or it's just easier to do this, though Faberge obviously isn't a word, right? So, I enter this, right? Now, watch what the game does. It always auto-corrects it. Gotta love that. So, we'll enter Faberge. The killer is Faberge. At that precise moment, a terrible scream rang out from somewhere in the inn. Good job figuring that out. Grace. No, that wasn't Grace's voice. That's what I told myself anyway. I rushed up the steps to the first floor. Then, I heard the sound of running from the hallway. Has someone else been killed? If only I put it together a little more quickly. Dashing up the stairs, the first thing I saw was Amber lying on the floor. I quickly looked around, but there was no sign of anyone nearby. He probably ran back into his room. I tiptoed quietly to Amber. I was too late. I knew with just one glance that she was beyond help. Blood was gushing from a massive wound in her head. Her eyes were glazed over, staring into empty space. Now that I knew who the killer was, the sight of yet another victim filled me not with fear, not with sadness, but with overwhelming anger. Gripping the mop handle firmly, I marched into Faberge's room, opened the door, and closed it behind me. He was lying there just as when I had seen him last. You don't have to play dead anymore, I said, leaning against the closed door. The corpse didn't even quiver. Could I have been wrong? I was starting to think so when... So, you figured it out, huh? Too bad for you. Faberge sat up menacingly and put his feet on the floor. How did you know? Your hands were too cold, colder than Mr. Buchanan's, and he was in the cellar. In fact, your hands were as cold as someone who'd been touching ice or snow for a long time. Clever. Guess I overdid it a bit. Clucking his tongue impatiently, Faberge reached out under his shirt and pulled something out. Expecting it to be a gun, I prepared for the worst, but it turned out to be a rolled-up towel. So that's how you made it look like you had no pulse, huh? I thought it was pretty smart. If you put a ball or something under your armpit and hold the arm down hard, you can stop the flow of blood. And if you stop the flow of blood, naturally, you stop the pulse. Expecting that someone would come and check him out, Faberge had used snow from the outside the window to make his hands cold, then held a rolled-up towel under his arm to stop his pulse. I had already seen too many deaths by the time I checked on Faberge. That was probably why I didn't look too closely. And, yet again, once the killings start, if you don't slow down and take a second to think, you basically get swept up in everything. You fall for anything, practically. Still, I felt like a fool for falling for such a simple trick. If I had been more careful, Amber wouldn't have had to die. Why did you do it? Those people were innocent. Unable to contain my anger, I screamed at him. I was surprised to see what appeared to be a look of regret cross his face. What did they do to you? Mr. Buchanan, Mr. and Mrs. Forrest, Bobby, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones? I don't remember killing him, but I suppose you could say I did in a sense. I didn't have the faintest idea what that meant. But why did you come here anyway? Was it just to kill? Faberge ignored my question. Despite the fact that he was unarmed and there wasn't a weapon in sight, he seemed supremely confident. The girls are still alive, I said, and I'm not going to let you hurt them. Ho ho, playing the hero, hey? It'd be smarter to worry about your own life, but it's far too late for that. Don't come any closer. Desperately, I held the mop out in front of me, ready to strike. Faubers, unperturbed, continued to walk slowly towards me. Shaken by his bloodthirsty aggressiveness, I backed up. Soon, my back was up against the door. Seeing me fumbling frantically behind me for the doorknob, Faubers laughed scornfully. Running away? Gonna ask the girls to save you? This is it, I thought. He's got me. I waited until he took another step towards me, and then I attacked, swinging the mop handle in a whistling arc. He dodged it effortlessly. In the blink of an eye, he circled behind me and caught me in a tight chokehold. Even worse, the hand around my throat was holding a knife that seemed to magically appear from nowhere. You're a dead man, Max. He pressed the cold edge of the knife to my neck. Max? The moment I heard my name, there was a banging sound, and Faubers staggered. I realized that this might be my only chance. I grabbed the hand holding the knife with both of my hands. Twisting it, I jumped out of his range. Faubers shouted in pain and dropped the knife. But then, somehow, he reversed my arm and threw me forward onto the bed. A moment later, his massive hands were wrapped around my neck. Not only couldn't I breathe, but I was in terrible pain as his powerful fingers began to literally crush my windpipe. Everything started to go black, and the lights in the room seemed to grow dimmer and dimmer. Suddenly, the weight on top of me vanished. Immediately, I drew a gasping breath and, coughing, struggled not to vomit. Looking past the black spots still swirling in my vision, I saw Grace standing in the doorway. She appeared to be in shock, staring blankly at her bloody hands. The next moment, our eyes met and she came running to me. Max, are you alright? I didn't feel like I could speak yet, so I just nodded. Thank God, I thought you were dead. She threw her arms around me and sobbed. Grace. She stabbed Faubers to save my life. I was ashamed of myself for doubting her, even for a second. If it hadn't been for her, I'd be dead. It was clear that Grace and the girls would have soon followed, killed one by the murderer. I turned and looked at Faubers, lying on the floor, and was dumbstruck. Fear and desperation must have lent her fantastic strength, because the knife was buried in his back to the hilt. She must have pierced his heart with that one strike. Compared to all the other deaths by his hand, there was a surprising lack of blood. It was almost as if his body held less blood than normal. But why had he done the horrible things he did? And how did he kill Mr. Jones, even though it seemed like he never had the opportunity? Now that he was dead, I supposed I would never know. But for now, I was happy to be with Grace, holding her as we waited for dawn to break. The nightmare was finally over, and soon it would be morning. Grace skewers Faubers. So, I don't know if you would call that a good ending. At the very least, you and Grace and the girls are not dead, but everyone else is dead, and that's gotta be absolutely horrifying. I mean, you're safe at the very least, so, you got that going for you, but overall, things are pretty bad. And, you didn't solve the crime at all. You only barely figured out that it was Faubers, only barely, after he murdered everybody, and you still have no idea why or how he did most of this. So, that was, Grace skewers Faubers. We're going to move on to our next ending next. I have a sinking feeling, because I remember this one taking a while. In fact, let me pull it up for me. Yeah. I have a strange feeling this one's going to take a while, so we may only get through about half of this today, and we'll probably finish it up next time. But yeah, let me just get to there. Hey guys, welcome back. So right now we are at the point right after where Abby gets killed, and at this point we usually come to the decision that Mr. Buchanan is the killer, which obviously is incorrect. We know it's Faubers at this point. But instead of saying, I don't know who did it or anything, we're going to say I know who's behind it all. Now, you'll notice this is darkened. That's because I messed up this once earlier, so I'm redoing it. I know who's behind it all. Don't worry, I didn't get very far. I only got maybe like 3 slides forward before I figured out that I screwed up. Really? You know who killed Mr. Jones too? Grace asked somewhat skeptically. Mr. Jones? Not a clue, I said with a stupid grin. So, we're gonna save the killer is me for a later round. I actually have that planned for something else. But what if I said the killer is Grace? The killer, it's you, Grace! I bit my lip in regret. Grace's mouth dropped open in shock. Me? Is that supposed to be a joke? If it is, it's not funny at all. Come on, are you sure about that? Well, here goes. So, the killer isn't me or Grace. We're gonna say the killer is Faberge, until I have actually already typed this in once. Faberge. Except I spelled it wrong again, dang it. There we go. Okay, I don't know if maybe the game doesn't accept Faberge without Mr. in front of it. I don't remember that being a problem, but if it did, all I had to do was enter Mr. Faberge. So you're the one that killed them, huh? For a few moments, it looked like Faberge didn't even realize I was talking about him. Me? You're talking about me? Are you kidding? That's ridiculous. Grace threw in her 2 cents. Of course it is. There's no way Faberge did it. He didn't have the opportunity to kill Mr. Jones, and besides, he's got a terrible head injury. Did you actually see how terrible this injury was? I didn't. All I saw was a little blood coming out. Even Mr. Forrest said it didn't look all that serious. So you're saying that I've been faking it? No, I know you've got some kind of wound, but you might have done it to yourself. That sounded right. It made the most sense. The killer went through all that trouble to chop up a corpse into little pieces. I didn't think someone like that would do such a poor job of attacking someone if it would leave them under suspicion. And that was exactly why I didn't think Bobby or Mr. Forrest was actually the killer. Faberge chuckled, resigned. Well, if you want to believe that, it's up to you. But no matter how you look at it, I couldn't have possibly killed Mr. Jones. I was in the lounge from the time I got here, except when I ran to my room to put down my luggage. When exactly do you think I could have killed a man and cut up his body? Everyone was quiet, waiting to hear my reply. What if I was wrong about this? Worry caused me to hesitate. After taking a deep breath, I carefully spoke. That's true. You couldn't have killed Mr. Jones. You might have had time to kill him when you went to your room, but you didn't have time to dismember him. There, you see, Faberge said triumphantly. But I wasn't finished. Hold on. You weren't the only one that didn't have time to do that. No one did, except for Bobby. He was the only one that wasn't around when we heard the glass break. Yeah, so he must be the killer. What did you say? Bobby shouted furiously as he started walking aggressively towards Faberge. Hey, settle down. I quickly got between him and Faberge. Okay, now, for the sake of argument, let's just say for a moment that the glass had nothing to do with the murder. Nothing to do with it? What do you mean? That's when the killer ran away, it's obvious. Faberge waved his hands animatedly, completely exasperated. That's what we all thought at first. Until Abby was killed, that is. I continued on. If the killer had come back from somewhere, there would have been some kind of tracks. When I checked Mr. Jones's room the second time, there was already a few inches of snow on the floor. So if he had left from there, the hallway would have been wet. Did anyone see anything like that? I looked around the room, but no one answered. In other words, no one ever left the inn and snuck back in. Whoever killed Mr. Jones and Abby had been here the whole time. And why do you figure that's me? Faberge asked the obvious question. I ignored him and turned to Mr. Forrest. When you first saw Mr. Jones's body, didn't you think it looked like a mannequin? Well, yes. That's what I thought at first. But it was a person for sure, he emphasized. Absolutely. I think so too. But don't you think the reason it looked like a mannequin because it wasn't bleeding much? And not only did it not have much blood, but it was also half frozen. Well, the window was broken and the snow was blowing in. But now that you mention it, I don't remember much blood. So what does that mean? At first, I thought he must have cut up the body in the bathroom and brought it out there. But there was no sign of blood or even water in the bathroom. which means that he couldn't have done it there. Say what? Where'd he cut up the darned thing up? I completely forgot his voice. It's been a while since he said anything. Mr. Buchanan asked wildly. I know, Grace shouted. He killed him outside, right? Then, after cutting him up out there, he threw the body parts up through the window. I'd consider that idea briefly myself, but now I shook my head. No, there was hardly any broken glass on the inside, so I don't think so. So if it wasn't the bathroom and it wasn't outside, where did he do it? Bobby was clearly getting irritated. I locked eyes with Faberge. I thought I saw him flinch slightly and my confidence grew. It wasn't in the bathroom, it wasn't outside the room, and it wasn't in the snow. In fact, no one killed Mr. Jones. No one could have dismembered him. There was a sudden silence. Finally, Mr. Forrest laughed. What? You're going to tell us that he was killed by a Banshee, I suppose? Wrong. It was no Banshee. What I'm trying to say is that Mr. Jones was never killed and he was never dismembered. Isn't that right, Mr. Jones? And that's where we're going to leave it off for today. Sorry if it's a little bit short. I did mess up some stuff, but I am slightly taxed for time today. But next time we'll get back and we'll see what he means by that. You might be able to figure it out already, but if not, we will go over it in very good detail next time. So thanks for watching. Bye.